At the polo ground, my spouse embarrassed me by introducing his girlfriend as his prospective bride. His fury became explosive when I challenged him. He left me hurt and powerless after tying me behind a horse. Just in time, a stranger saved me. But the very following day, I'm back. Not as a victim, but with a vengeance so horrible he never noticed it approaching. Sophia is my name. I would have laughed if someone had informed me that my life would veer thus dramatically. I used to think I had it all. My love of Polo, a kind town, and a husband who appeared to get me. At least that is what I believed. Growing up in a suburban region well known for its energetic polo ground, I developed early affection for the game. Polo was my passion, my haven, and the place I really felt alive. Not only a game to me. In our community, by my late 20s, I was among the most talented players. Juggling a competitive sport in a tiny community proved difficult, but the thrill I experienced on the pitch made every difficulty rewarding. Meeting Ethan, I felt I had discovered someone who appreciated my individuality and fortitude. Ethan, in his mid-30s, was older than I was, and his confidence had a way of inspiring belief in you. He said all the proper things, praising my ability and pushing my aspirations. Or so originally looked to be. Ethan was delightful. I was enamored. He made me feel as though he would be my friend in all things, someone I could trust. I had no idea how trust would be destroyed. I followed my love of Polo even after we were married. I recall how he would periodically come up at games, seeing me play with a distant kind of interest. Though occasionally I could see pride in his eyes, most of the time it seemed like he was just waiting for something. What? I wondered. Ethan became less charming at home. He chastised me for concentrating on the sport, saying I was squandering time on a hobby fit for children. At first, I dismissed it, telling myself he might be simply having a terrible day and not meant it. Still, the remarks become sharper and more frequent. "Sophia, don't you think it's time to grow up?" he would say, his voice laced with contempt. "You are not some young dream chaser." Why he was so contemptuous confused me. He knew who I was since he had with a polo player. But I said nothing, believing I could manage two worlds, my marriage and my passion for the game. It was a thin line to walk, and I made great effort to not trip. One sunny afternoon, things turned around. Having just ended a practice at the polo ground, I felt the customary surge of gratification following a strong game. Ethan arrived, the sun was bright, the air was clear, and I was talking with several colleagues. He was not on his alone. Beside him was a young woman who exuded elegance and calm and wore pricey attire that shouted money and position. She was shockingly beautiful, the kind of beauty that attracted attention wherever she went. Ethan spent no time flitting through politeness. Rather, he added, "Sophia, meet Olivia, my future wife," grinning smugly and self-satisfyingly. I considered it a terrible joke momentarily. As I stared at him attempting to understand his words, my heart raced and my mouth got dry. "What?" With quivering voice, I managed to whisper. "You heard me," he continued, his voice laid back, like if he were talking about the weather. "Olivia and I intend to be married. She is everything you are not, sophisticated, rich, and worth my attention." Too stunned to answer, I froze. Around us, the people had stopped talking. Their eyes flew between us. Ethan's comments really hit me like a gut check. "How dare you?" My voice breaking, I said at last. He lacked flinching. "Oh, save me the drama, Sophia. You are simply a cheap lady squandering time on ridiculous games. Olivia is the kind of woman who really could change my life." His brutality left me gasping for air and cut like a blade. I was completely devastated, betrayed, and embarrassed. This was the man I had believed in, the man I had trusted, and here he was walking his betrayal before everyone. Turning to Olivia, I looked for some indication of guilt or regret, but her face was blank. She said nothing, only stood there looking almost cold. I thought my entire universe was collapsing all around me. "You're disgusting," I told Ethan, my voice quivering with hurt and rage. "You think you can get away with treating people like this?" His answer was a chilly laugh. "Hey, Sophia, grow up." I wanted to shout, strike out, make him feel even a tiny bit of the suffering he had brought about. Rather, though, I turned aside and started crying. I felt absolutely alone in that moment. Ethan had betrayed what I knew about him, my dignity and my trust. Still, something inside me refused to give up even though his treachery stung. Though I had no idea yet, I was resolved to transcend the suffering he had caused on me. Looking back, the day was only getting started. What ensued would challenge me to my limits and force me to discover a strength I never would have thought I possessed. The hours following that terrible meeting with Ethan were a haze of pain and incredulity. Emotions I couldn't process, anger, grief, uncertainty, and most of all, a sense of betrayal so profound it left me gasping, were drowning me. How someone I had loved, someone I thought loved me, could abuse me with such brutality baffled me. Replaying his remarks in my head overnight, each one sliced like a dagger. I chose to face Ethan the following morning. I couldn't let this go unpackled. He owed me an explanation, for mine as much as for his own benefit. He was in the living room, idly surfing his phone as though nothing had happened. Though my voice faltered slightly, I added firmly, "We need to talk." He did not even glance up. "About what?" he said, his voice apathetic. "Regarding yesterday's events, about Olivia. You introducing her as your future wife while I am your wife now. How embarrassing that was for me. Do you know?" At last he set down his phone and stared at me, his face icy. "For you, Sophia, humiliating. Let's not frame this around emotions. I am telling you straightforwardly. Is that not exactly what you always wanted? Accuracy. Honesty." I said again, my voice growing. "You call flaunting another lady in front of me honest. Ethan, you have been lying to me. Now, you want to act as though you were doing me a favor." Rising to his feet, he cast an imposing presence I had not before observed. "You fail to understand, do you? Olivia represents my future. She comes from privilege, from power. She is someone who can really improve my life rather than keep me back like you do." "Hold me back?" "Incredibly," I said. "Ethan, I have helped you in any manner I could. Notwithstanding your frequent criticism and devaluation of my enthusiasm, I have fought hard to keep this marriage intact. You're now blaming me for keeping you back as well." He let his eyes roll back. "Spare me, Sophia. The speech is not needed. You're just a cheap girl squandering her time on a ridiculous game. You believe Polo will establish your value? Funny." Those words tore something within of me. Every year of self-doubt he had sown in me, every moment I had second-guessed myself because of his contempt came flooding to the surface. My voice shaking with rage. "I don't care what you think about Polo, Eden," I said. "You cannot, however, determine my value, and you most definitely do not treat me like I am disposable." His manner changed at that point. His apathy grew to wrath, and before I realized it, he snatched my arm and pulled me toward the door. "You want to see how disposable you are?" he growled. "Allow me to show you." I battled his hold, but Ethan was strong, and his rage made him considerably more aggressive. He held me outdoors toward the polo ground, where I had spent so many joyful hours. No, it was empty, shockingly quiet, but for my objections and his labored breathing. "Stop, Eden. What are you doing?" I begged, panic starting in my chest. He remained silent. Rather, he tied me to one of the practice bowls from a length of rope taken from the equipment shed. My heart was hammering so fiercely I felt it may explode. "Ethan, this is crazy. Let me go." He was not paying attention, though. His black eyes full of wrath, he mounted his horse. "Sophia, you seem to be quite difficult. When you lie there powerless, let us see how strong you are." Then he did something I will never forget. Riding his horse perilously near to me, he whirled around at a terrible pace. Every pass was nearer than the one before it. The hooves of the horse kicked dirt and gravel straight toward my arms and face. The anxiety felt like it was choking. I could scarcely breathe. The sound of the galloping horse buried my screams. The emotional wreckage was far more than the physical suffering. How could someone I had loved become this monster? Every time I yelled out, expecting he would stop, he appeared to get more excited. He seemed to feed off my anxiety. It ceased abruptly then as well. First, I had no idea why. Tears clouded my vision, and I was too scared to make sense of anything. When I opened my eyes, though, Olivia was just a few steps away, her face pallid and her eyes wide with amazement. "What the mess is wrong with you, Anne?" Her voice wrenched as she yelled. "Stay out of this, Olivia," Ethan said. "Between me and my wife is this." Olivia, though, was not backing down. She retrieved her phone and began filming. Her voice now more steady. "You're insane," she murmured. "I'll make sure everyone knows kind of man you are if you don't stop right now." Ethan hesitated, glaring at her momentarily. Though I assumed he might also attack her, he dismounted and fled, leaving me tied and crying on the ground as though he realized he couldn't fight this battle. Olivia hurried to me, untying the ropes with shaky hands. Her voice full of real worry, she questioned, "Are you okay?" I had no response. Everything that had lately happened made me too overwhelmed. But it dawned on me then. Olivia was not my adversary. She had chosen to assist me for reasons I cannot yet know. She had seen the monster Ethan really was. I was too stunned to completely understand the weight of what had just happened when Olivia untied me and got me moving. Though my body hurt from the injuries, the betrayal caused the most pain. Ethan was dangerous, not just nasty. I leaned on Olivia for support, not sure why she had intervened. She was, after all, the lady Ethan had so boldly announced his future bride. "Let me get you to the hospital," Olivia stated gently but forcefully. Ignoring the still present cloud of dust, she put her arm around me and guided me toward her car. I wanted to oppose. I wanted to tell her I could do this on my own, and I didn't need her aid. The truth was, though, I couldn't. Too wounded and damaged, both physically and mentally, I could not drive her away. I thus let her lead me, each step weighing more than the previous. Except for Olivia asking often whether I was okay, the drive to the hospital was quiet. I ran not sure what to say. After what Ethan had done, after what he had proven himself to be, how could I be okay? My head whirled with ideas, unanswered questions, and feelings I couldn't control. But one query burned more brilliantly than the others. Why had Olivia intervened? Staff members at the hospital took me right away to address the injuries and bruises Ethan's violence had left behind. Olivia stayed with me all through, silently seated in the room's corner as the nurses worked. She looked not like the composed, self-assured woman Ethan had brought to the Polo ground. Rather, she seemed startled, as if the events of the day had rattled her as much as they had rocked me. When the nurse left us alone, Olivia finally spoke. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," she said, her voice trembling. I had no idea Ethan was capable of something like that. I looked at her, unsure how to respond. Was this sympathy genuine, or was it just guilt? "You didn't know?" I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. "You're the one he's planning to marry. How could you not know who he really is?" Olivia sighed and looked down, twisting her hands in her lap. I don't know what I was thinking, Ethan. He's charming, persuasive. He made me believe in this image of himself that isn't real. I thought I knew him, but after today, she paused, shaking her head. I can't believe I ever trusted him. I wanted to tell her that she should have seen it sooner, that she should have known better. But the truth was I had fallen for the same charm, the same lies. Ethan had fooled both of us. What he did to you today, Olivia continued, her voice breaking. It was horrifying. I can't stand by and let him get away with it. Her words took me by surprise. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to help you, she said firmly. Ethan needs to face the consequences of what he's done to you. to me, to anyone who's been caught in his web. I stared at her, trying to gauge her sincerity. Was she serious? Could I trust her? But as I looked into her eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. Guilt, remorse, and a determination that mirrored my own. "Why would you do that?" I asked cautiously after everything. "Because what he did was wrong," Olivia said, her voice unwavering now. "And because I can't marry someone like that. I won't. Today, I saw who he really is, and I don't want any part of it." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time since Ethan's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to fight back. Over the next 2 days, Olivia and I began working together. She showed me the video she had recorded of Ethan's violent outburst, a chilling reminder of his cruelty. "This is evidence," she said, her tone determined. "We can use this to bring him to justice." It wasn't easy. Every step of the process felt like reopening the wounds Ethan had left behind. But Olivia's support gave me strength. She wasn't just apologizing for her role in my pain. She was actively trying to make things right. We went to the authorities, presenting the video and recounting the events of that awful day. The officers were appalled, and their response was swift. A case was opened against Ethan, charging him with assault, abuse, and endangerment. As the legal wheels began to turn, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in weeks: empowerment. For so long, I had let Ethan's words and actions define me. But now, I was taking control. With Olivia by my side, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back. It was ironic, really. The woman Ethan had brought into my life to replace me was now the one helping me expose him. Olivia and I were an unlikely team, but together we were stronger than I ever imagined. The path ahead was uncertain, and the battle was far from over. But for the first time, I felt like justice was within reach. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. The days leading up to the trial were some of the most difficult of my life. Reliving the trauma of Ethan's betrayal and abuse was like ripping open a wound that had barely begun to heal. But I knew I couldn't give up. Ethan needed to face the consequences of what he had done, not just for me, but for every person he had hurt or manipulated. And with Olivia by my side, I felt stronger. Olivia surprised me in more ways than I can count. She didn't just stand by me, she fought alongside me. She was relentless in gathering evidence against Ethan, digging through old messages, emails, anything that might prove his pattern of deceit and abuse. She even connected with others who had crossed paths with Ethan and had similar stories of his manipulation. It was as though once the veil of his charm had been lifted, the truth became glaringly obvious. When the trial began, I was terrified. Ethan was still the man I had once loved, and part of me dreaded seeing him again. But as I sat in that courtroom, surrounded by lawyers, reporters, and strangers, I reminded myself why I was there. This wasn't about the past anymore. It was about reclaiming my future. Ethan walked into the courtroom with the same smug confidence I had once found so captivating. He didn't even glance in my direction. His arrogance was infuriating, but it also strengthened my resolve. He truly believed he was untouchable. He thought he could continue to manipulate and abuse without facing any consequences. But not this time. The prosecution presented the video Olivia had recorded, a stark and undeniable piece of evidence. Watching it play out on the screen was harrowing. Seeing myself tied up, crying out for help as Ethan's horse circled dangerously close was like reliving the nightmare all over again. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of my voice in the video, raw and filled with fear. I glanced at Ethan, hoping to see some sign of remorse, but there was none. He sat there, his face expressionless, as though the events in the video were happening to someone else. But the jury's reaction was clear. Their faces were a mix of shock and disgust. And for the first time, I felt like justice might actually be possible. When it was my turn to testify, my hands trembled as I took the stand. I spoke about the person Ethan had pretended to be, the man I thought I had married, and how that illusion had shattered over time. I described his growing disdain for me, his cruel words, and the terrifying day when he had taken his anger to a horrifying level. I also spoke about Olivia, how she had stepped in when no one else did, how she had risked her own safety to stop Ethan and bring him to justice. She could have walked away, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion welling inside me. But she chose to do the right thing, and because of her, I'm standing here today. Olivia testified too. Her words were powerful, painting a picture of the man Ethan truly was. A manipulative, abusive individual who cared for no one but himself. She recounted how she had believed his lies, how she had fallen for his charm, and how her perception of him had shattered when she saw his true nature. I was horrified, she said, her voice breaking. But I knew I couldn't stay silent. What he did to Sophia was monstrous, and he needs to be held accountable. Ethan's defense sought to denigrate Olivia as a jilted lover wanting retribution, and me as a sour wife clinging to her resentment. Still, the data spoke more loudly than their words. All of the film, the testimony, the supporting documentation from others who had gone through Ethan's manipulations portrayed a negative image. My heart hammered so loudly I could hardly hear the judge's comments when the decision was eventually delivered. Then I listened carefully. Guilty. Ethan was condemned for endangerment, assault, and abuse to a long prison term. The relief that came over me was deluging. I had been helpless against him for so long, but today justice had been done. Not anymore. He cannot harm anybody else. Olivia and I stood outside the courthouse following the trial, the weight of the trauma at last lightening. I said to her, "Thank you," my voice full of thanks. I'd not know how I would have done this without you. She grinned, unshed tears glittering in her eyes. We accomplished this, Sophia, together. You are stronger than you could possibly imagine. In retrospect, I saw she was correct. The road has not only been one of assigning Ethan responsibility. It has been about regaining my own power. I was not the same lady that had allowed Ethan's words and behavior define her. I had reclaimed my life, found my voice, and rebelled. Though they never defined me, the scars he left will always be with me. The bravery to stand up, the tenacity to press on, and the encouragement of an unanticipated friend reminding me that justice is worth fighting for defined me. I experienced hope as I left the courtroom that day, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan's chapter in my life closed at last, and for the first time I was prepared to write my own.
Bellowed through the phone. It should have been a jolting moment, but I knew better. This was just his attempt at stirring up drama. I already sold it, and you know what? I could practically feel his emotions quivering on the other end. Did he honestly believe I wouldn't see through his little charade? His naivety was almost comical. As his accusations continued to ricochet off my resolve, I found myself teetering between anger and amusement. Yet amid it all, a sense of empowerment began to emerge. This wasn't just a spat. This was a turning point. This was the moment I decided to take control. I chuckled inwardly at his feeble attempt to manipulate me. Then, as if the universe had aligned, a realization dawned on me. It was my turn to play. I'm Olivia, a 28-year-old working mom. Though I've held a steady job at a college store since I graduated from junior college at 20, Jackson's career trajectory has been less than stable. He's 2 years older, but when we first met 3 years ago, he was bouncing between jobs or sometimes doing nothing at all. He proposed to me hastily, but I set a condition. He needed to secure a stable job. I wasn't about to embark on a marriage without considering our future. Okay, but there's a condition, I asserted firmly, watching Jackson's expression shift to one of concern. What is it? He asked cautiously. You need to find a stable job, otherwise marriage is out of the question. We need to think about our future. He attempted to brush it off with a casual remark. Oh, don't worry, you're working, so there's no rush, right? But my parents would be concerned if I married without a job. I'll find one before we tie the knot, he promised, sensing the seriousness in my tone. Reluctantly, Jackson embarked on his job search journey. Eventually, he secured an office position at a construction company, and we moved forward with our plans to wed. At the time, I saw Jackson as somewhat careless with money and work, but I believed our partnership could balance each other out. I thought I could guide him toward financial responsibility, and he would complement my strength. Little did I know, our challenges were just beginning. About a year into our marriage, as we were exploring the idea of buying a house, Jackson revealed a troubling obstacle. I might not qualify for a loan, he confessed casually. I was taken aback. What do you mean? I pressed for an explanation. He shrugged. Because I have been at my job long enough, I might need a guarantor for the loan. The only option would be my dad, but he's dealing with some serious gambling debts. He probably wouldn't be able to help. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? I was dumbfounded, especially with the contract and the real estate agent right in front of us. But Jackson, appearing unfazed, nonchalantly remarked, "If we put the house in your name, it'll be fine, right? You've been at your job forever, so you can secure the loan. We'll both contribute to paying it off. It's just a formality." That's beside the point. Why didn't you bring this up before? This is significant for me too. I'm not even prepared with the paperwork, I retorted, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Though he offered an apology, his contrition felt superficial, lacking sincerity. Despite my urge to protest further, faced with the already arranged contract and the presence of the agent, I decided against escalating the situation. Reluctantly, I hastily gathered the necessary documents, such as my income statement for the loan application, and impulsively finalized the purchase under my name. Don't nod at me. Could I truly envision a future with this man? Perhaps I should have simply asserted, "Then we won't proceed," instead of hastily preparing the paperwork. My anxiety heightened with the looming issue of my in-laws. The other day, I had a conversation with Dad, Jackson began. He mentioned he might lose the house due to the debt I mentioned earlier, so he's considering moving in with us. Is that all right? What? Why would you even entertain that idea? I reacted swiftly, but Jackson merely shrugged it off. Well, he's facing difficulties. My brother is single, but he's working abroad. I'm the only one Dad can turn to. Shouldn't we seriously discuss this? Maybe he can stay temporarily until he finds a place, but committing to living with us permanently is a major decision. Jackson scowled. You just don't want him to stay, do you? If he moves in, we can divide the living expenses. You're always going on about money. You mean the money you never contribute? You promised we'd split the mortgage, but it's only coming out of my paycheck. You haven't given your share. In marriage, finances are shared. It's not just your money, it's ours. It's deducted from your account because the house is in your name. Stop being so self-centered, I exclaimed, frustration evident in my tone, but Jackson simply muttered, "I hate discussing money," before storming out of the room. Such disputes became a regular occurrence. Every time, Jackson would brush off my concerns and eventually retreat. No resolution was ever reached. However, Jackson wasn't entirely inactive regarding his family's predicament. As part of his role in construction site administration, he frequently dealt with real estate contracts. He often consulted a specific agency on how to secure the best price for selling his family's home and the necessary procedures involved. I overheard these discussions repeatedly, finding solace in the fact that I wasn't alone in contemplating this matter. Yet the prospect of my in-laws moving in with us post-sale, as if it were a foregone conclusion, continued to unsettle me. Jackson began attending meetings with real estate agents and my in-laws without involving me, and he started spending more weekends away from home. Eventually, he embarked on a lengthy business trip lasting several months, necessitated by the distance of the construction site he was overseeing. It wasn't apparent to me then, but the seeds of our power struggle had already been sown. A few days after Jackson departed for his trip, I decided to treat myself to tea after a shopping excursion. Hello, the man who greeted me seemed familiar. Memories flooded back, recalling him as someone Jackson had once brought home. He worked at a real estate company, a young employee named Samuel. According to Jackson, Samuel had been with the company for less than a year. Yes, I remember you. You visited our house before, right? Yes, I apologize for dropping by unannounced and even joining for a meal. My apologies. No need to worry. I should have been more welcoming. We ended up sharing tea together. Samuel was affable and appeared more level-headed than Jackson. Despite his youth, as we conversed over tea, we found common ground and eventually bid each other farewell. At that moment, I couldn't fathom that this brief encounter would later be twisted into an accusation of infidelity. Yet that's precisely what happened when Jackson confronted me. You've been cheating on me while I was away, haven't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave immediately. Jackson's accusation hit me like a sledgehammer. In that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if the rumors were true. Jackson had evidently been spreading falsehoods, fabricating a narrative of my infidelity to justify his desire for divorce. The bearer of this false tale was none other than Samuel, the man Jackson unjustly accused me of having an affair with. He showed up at my doorstep the day after our tea. I apologized for the sudden visit yesterday. Jackson asked me to reach out to you, Samuel confessed as he stood at my doorway. Shock and confusion washed over me, but I invited him inside, eager to hear his story. What he revealed left me stunned. Jackson had orchestrated a plan to frame me for infidelity, all in a bid to secure a divorce. Samuel was roped into fabricating evidence to support the scheme. There were two motives driving Jackson's deceitful agenda. Firstly, he coveted our house. Fearing the potential loss of his parents' property, Jackson sought cohabiting with his parents as the easiest solution. My resistance to the idea led him to devise a plan to oust me and claim the property. Secondly, Jackson was involved in an affair of his own, spending weekends with his mistress while pretending to discuss matters with my parents-in-law. His infatuation with her led him to view me, his wife, as an impediment. By framing me for infidelity, he hoped to secure both the house and compensation in the divorce settlement. Despite my perception of Jackson's lack of astuteness, his cunning nature in orchestrating such a devious plan was truly despicable. As I muttered my disdain, Samuel offered his apologies. However, I had no intention of aiding Jackson in his malicious scheme. I feigned cooperation, all the while plotting to turn the tables on him. Leveraging his expertise in real estate, Samuel offered various suggestions. Eventually, he proposed a daring move. You should sell the house while Jackson is away on his trip. So, when Jackson returned, bewildered by the news of the sale, I delivered the final blow. I know everything, Jackson. Samuel recorded everything, including your attempt to frame me for cheating with him. If we proceed with divorce, I can claim alimony and take you to court, I declared, relishing the shock that registered on Jackson's face. Why? He stammered, but I wasn't finished. I had one last card to play. You might not have realized, but Samuel isn't just any new employee. He's the son of the company's CEO. I emphasized, incredulous at Jackson's obliviousness. Didn't you notice Samuel shares the same last name as the CEO? How did that escape your notice? I pressed, my frustration mounting. Well, Samuel's last name isn't exactly uncommon. Jackson attempted to rationalize. Are you serious right now? I couldn't believe his lack of awareness. Yes, I'm serious, Jackson replied, his shock palpable. The realization dawned on him slowly. Samuel's company was one of Jackson's most crucial clients, and they had played a significant role in handling his family's property matters. If news of this deceit reached the CEO, Jackson would undoubtedly find himself in hot water. In fact, Samuel had likely already reported the situation. Look, fine, I'll check it out, but if you're lying, I'll figure it out, Jackson relented before abruptly ending the call. It didn't take long for him to realize the gravity of his actions. Subsequently, the real estate company owned by Samuel's father refused to engage in any business dealings with Jackson or offer him advice regarding his family's property. With my house sold, Jackson had no option but to return to his family home following his business trip. Fortunately, Samuel had assisted me in finding an affordable apartment, so I encountered no difficulties as I initiated the divorce proceedings. Jackson persisted in reaching out to me. I'm sorry, Olivia. Please forgive me, he pleaded. It's too late for apologies now. You tried to manipulate me using someone else. Why should I believe anything you say? I countered. Don't say that. After our divorce, you can be with that other woman, right? That's what you wanted, isn't it? He suggested, attempting to deflect blame. Yeah, she had someone else she liked and dumped me, he admitted. What a sorry tale, but just because of that, don't expect me to change my mind and come running back to you. I muttered as I ended the call with a heavy sigh. Despite not disclosing my current address to him in hopes of keeping him at bay, Jackson's incessant calls persisted. Each time, he pleaded, "Please don't leave me. I'll change. I'll be a better husband." Yeah, I was weary of his hollow promises. Once the divorce is finalized, I'll delete his number, block him on WhatsApp, and sever ties completely. To make matters worse, even my mother-in-law reached out, begging, "Please, Olivia, we'll be lost without you. It's not me you wanted. It's the house, right?" But there's no house left, I reminded her. It wasn't just about the house. We're not that heartless. Come back, and you'll understand, she implored. You wanted the money, didn't you? I shot back, frustration seeping into my voice. That's not true. You're being unfair. You attempted to coerce me into living with you, and when I refused, Jackson resorted to deceit to gain leverage in the divorce. I can't trust someone who resorts to such tactics, I asserted firmly. It's obvious you're only interested in money. I continued to rebuff their pleas. Then my father-in-law called, his tone dripping with arrogance. Isn't it your duty as a daughter-in-law to assist my wife a little? Are you seriously refusing? Isn't all of this a consequence of the debts you've accumulated? I countered, my resolve unwavering. In response, his voice on the phone grew so loud that it hurt my ears. You heartless woman, abandoning your mother-in-law in her time of need and shifting blame onto her. I'll teach you a lesson, you wicked woman. With that, I ended the call, shaken but determined. Armed with the recorded audio, I sought counsel from my lawyer. As it transpired, my father-in-law's words constituted a threat. Armed with this evidence, I informed Jackson that I would pursue legal action if he didn't agree to the divorce. In a panic, Jackson reluctantly consented to the divorce. Finally, I was free from the clutches of that outrageous family. After the divorce, Jackson's reputation at work suffered, leading to a loss of trust and diminished responsibilities. Additionally, the unresolved debt forced him to sell his family home at a steep discount. Now, he resides in a modest apartment with his parents, grappling with a reduced salary and the burden of supporting his family. To compound his challenges, he is obligated to pay me alimony. Learning about Jackson's struggles firsthand from Samuel, who remained incompetent, I discovered an opportunity to leverage my customer service skills from my previous role at a clothing store. Samuel, now working in the HR department of a real estate company, recommended me for a position that required strong communication abilities. After careful consideration and discussions with Samuel, I accepted the offer and transitioned to the real estate company. Throughout this transition, Samuel and I maintained our close bond, which eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. After a year of dating, we tied the knot, and I became the spouse of the future company president. Jackson likely never envisioned that the two individuals he attempted to falsely accuse of infidelity would ultimately find love and marry each other. Now, surrounded by my supportive new family, including my in-laws, I look forward to building a beautiful life together with Samuel.
We don't need you anymore. Get out, you freeloading work-from-home slacker. Those harsh words from my sister, joined by my parents, stung deeply. Get out. I'm sick of a family that treats me and my dog like burdens, they all said. If they were going to be like this, I decided I'd do whatever I wanted. That's when I started planning my revenge. I'm Emily, a 34-year-old single woman who works as a freelance web designer. My job only needs a laptop, so I work from home and at my own pace. Even though I have a job that many would envy, my peace was disrupted about 2 years ago when my parents began to invade my space. One day, while I was working from home, my parents showed up unannounced. As soon as they walked in, they started looking around. This house is huge. It seems like we could live here too. My mom said, glancing around. Yeah, there's even a spare room. It's such a waste for Emily to live in such a nice house all by herself. My dad agreed. Let's move in this weekend, my mom decided, ignoring me completely. I was stunned. They were making decisions without asking me. I tried to make it clear that I had no intention of living with them. Wait a minute, I'm not planning to live with you guys. What are you talking about? My father's face turned bright red as he shouted, You took over this house, claiming it from your uncle and trying to make it yours. This is ridiculous. I didn't take over anything. I had a proper conversation with Uncle, and he gave it to me, I said. Stop making excuses. Our old house is falling apart. Your mother and I are moving in this weekend, he insisted. In reality, this house was a gift from my uncle, who always had a soft spot for me. The title was still in his name, but he told me I could use it however I wanted. According to my father, their old house was too old and needed a major renovation, which they couldn't afford. That's why they decided to move into the house I inherited. I wasn't thrilled about it, but they had already sold their house and claimed they had nowhere else to go. I couldn't just leave them without a place to stay, so I reluctantly agreed to let them move in. From the moment they arrived, my parents started making sarcastic remarks. Emily, you're over 30 now. Don't you have any plans to get married? My mom asked. I'm happy with my work right now, I replied. Well, if you keep talking like that, you'll never get married. Why don't you learn something from your sister? She continued. My sister's married life wasn't exactly going smoothly, but I kept that to myself. Anyway, I'm doing fine for now. That's when my mom interrupted. Don't talk badly about your sister. Unlike you, she's married and has a job at a company. So what if I'm not married? I'm doing a decent job, I said. You're always just playing around on your computer. You must be making money through some shady means, my mom accused. Shady means? I'm making a living with legitimate work. You don't need to worry, I said. How dare you talk back to your mother? You're the complete opposite of your sister, she snapped. My parents constantly compared me to my sister. Yes, she had a job at a company, but it was just a temporary office position. I didn't look down on her, but I earned more than she did. I understood that people from my parents' generation didn't fully grasp working from home, but it was hurtful to be constantly belittled. Then, one day, while I was preparing dinner, something my always idle parents never did, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. To my surprise, it was my sister Emma arriving with a huge amount of luggage. Hi, Emma. What's going on? I asked, confused. It's been a while. Emily, this is Sutton, but I'll be living here from now on, she said. I was taken aback. Living here from today. I didn't hear anything about this. Didn't Mom and Dad tell you? I got divorced, Emma said flatly. Divorced? I asked, stunned. Yes, and I'll be relying on you from now on, Emma said, ignoring me as she trudged upstairs and claimed one of the empty rooms. Despite my attempts to resist, my parents sided with Emma, and I was powerless to change the situation. From then on, my stress just kept piling up. Emma had quit her job after her divorce and spent her days gossiping about me with our mother. Hey, Mom, isn't this dress cute? Emma asked. Oh yes, Emma, you look so pretty. It will definitely suit you, Mom said. Do you think so? It's totally not something Emily would wear, right? Emma said. Well, Emily is a bit plain. That's why she can't get hired anywhere. All she does is play around online at home, Mom said. Mom, you can't just say things like that, I protested. That was my life, constantly compared to my sister, with my parents always making me feel like I didn't measure up. It was exhausting and frustrating. As I was preparing dinner, my family made sure I could hear their conversation. I wanted to lash out, but I knew that would only give them the satisfaction they were looking for. So I chose to remain silent and continued living my life without reacting to their provocations. One day, a friend of mine had a litter of 4 puppies, and I decided to adopt one. I named him Muffin. He's a tiny black chihuahua with the most adorable round eyes. Whenever he looks at me, his tail wags so enthusiastically it looks like it might fall off. Owning a chihuahua had been a dream of mine since childhood. Working from home can be lonely, so I thought Muffin could provide some much-needed companionship. I was thrilled to bring him into my life. When I brought Muffin home, I didn't consult with my family. After all, this is my house, and I'm the one covering all of Muffin's expenses. I didn't see why they should have any say in the matter. As expected, my parents and Emma started complaining right away. "Hey, we didn't hear anything about you getting a dog," my mom said. "Dogs are so smelly. I can't stand bad odors," Emma added. "Emily, how could you just bring a dog home without asking us? We don't approve of this," my dad said. I calmly responded, "First of all, I didn't just pick him up off the street. A friend gave him to me. I'm covering all the costs for Muffin, so there shouldn't be an issue. If you have complaints, you're free to leave." At first, they were furious, their faces red with anger. But within a few hours, Muffin's cuteness won them over, and they began to fawn over him. "Aren't you cute? Who's Mommy? Who's Daddy? Oh, look at you, sweetheart." They cooed. I couldn't believe the sudden shift in their attitude. One moment they were angry, and the next they were completely charmed by Muffin. From that day on, they were constantly doting on him, which actually reduced their hostility towards me. Life became relatively calm. But one day this peace was shattered. While I was out running errands, my sister Emma called me in a panic. "Come home right now," she shouted. I asked what was wrong, and she yelled back, "Muffin did his business on my clothes. Now they smell. Just wash them. It will be fine. And isn't it your fault for leaving your clothes on the floor?" I replied, "What? It's my fault. It's your poor training of Muffin that's to blame." Emma retorted, "Enough. Muffin is still a puppy. If you take him for walks, he won't have accidents at home. You said you were excited to walk him today. Did you actually take him out?" I asked. "Well, I was going to take him later. It's all your fault for not teaching him properly. You owe me for the cleaning costs," Emma demanded. When I got home, Emma was still fuming. Both my parents were there, glaring at me alongside her. Emma threw the soiled red clothes at me and started shouting again. "I'm going to charge you for the cleaning costs, okay?" she said. "Why should I pay? It's your fault for not taking him for a walk and leaving your clothes on the floor," I said. "Shut up. Don't talk back. It's because of this stupid dog that this happened. What are you going to do about it?" Emma yelled. "Stupid dog? You seemed to like him before. Isn't it harsh to call him that just because of a little accident?" I said. "It's because of your poor training. Take responsibility." Emma shot back. I was shocked by my family's selfishness. While I was still processing my sister's unreasonable behavior, my parents joined in. "Emily, shouldn't you at least apologize to Emma?" my mom said. "That's right. All of this happened because of Muffin," my dad added. "Can't you both just drop it already? Puppies are like babies. They make mistakes sometimes. Can't you forgive him?" I said. "This situation only happened because of this stupid dog," Emma insisted. "Emily, you made the right choice by not getting married. If you had a child, I doubt you'd raise them properly," Emma said, making a hurtful comparison. "How dare you say that? If you had taken Muffin for walks and kept your place tidy, none of this would have happened," I replied. Finally, Emma raised her eyebrows and said, "I can't take it anymore. I don't need you or this dumb dog. Get out of this house." "What? Didn't you hear me? I said get out. We don't need a home-working freeloader here." Emma shouted, "A home-working freeloader? How could someone who is currently jobless say such a thing? And who do they think is paying for all the household expenses? It's me." As I stood there, stunned by my sister's outrageous demand, my parents chimed in. "That's right, Emily. Leave this house. Your presence only makes things worse. You're a jinx." All three of them kept repeating "get out" in front of me. My anger finally erupted. I had reached my limit. If this was how they were going to be, then I'd had enough. I packed my things, and with Muffin by my side, I left the house. As I left, my sister added fuel to the fire, saying, "This is all your fault. If you had just listened to me, none of this would have happened." They still didn't seem to understand their situation, even though trouble was clearly coming their way. Well, never mind. Let them enjoy themselves in the house. Suppressing a grin, I left with Muffin. A few days later, my sister called me unexpectedly. "Emily, help. What happened?" I asked. Emma's voice was trembling. "We've been told we need to leave by the end of this month." I remained calm. "So what? What's the problem? Why do we have to leave?" Emma's voice rose in panic. "I've decided to sell the house." Emma seemed to freeze. She stammered, "You've decided to sell it. You don't have the authority." "I do," I replied. "The house has been officially mine for a month now." Emma's shock was evident. "You're kidding, right? Even if Uncle transferred the title to you, you can't just sell it so easily." I explained. "I was worried too, but after you told me to leave, I consulted with Uncle. He told me the house is mine now. Emily, do what you want. Get away from that family as soon as possible." "No way," Emma said, her voice rising. Whether my parents were listening on speakerphone or not, they began to make a fuss. "Emily, stop this. We have no other place to go if we leave this house." "That's right. It's unthinkable to do this to your own family. If you're a good daughter, show some respect," my father added. "Respect?" I asked quietly. "You've always looked down on me compared to Emma. Who do you think has been supporting you for the past few years? You had nowhere to live, so I reluctantly let you stay with me." My parents were silent, clearly at a loss for words. I continued, my voice firm. "You treated me and Muffin like nuisances and kicked us out. Trying to be happy by driving out the original resident is shameless. You people deserve what's coming to you." My father began to beg. "Please, Emily, help us. We're sorry." "I don't care," I said coldly. "Fend for yourselves, you idiots." With that, I hung up the phone with a decisive click and blocked all their contacts. Muffin looked up at me, his little face full of concern. I hugged Muffin close. "I'm sorry for shouting, Muffin. It's all right now. I'll protect you. I'm so glad we're away from that family who treated you so poorly." Later, I heard that my parents and sister were forced to move out of the house at the last minute. Despite their desperate pleas, with my father's small income and my mother and sister both unemployed, they struggled to make ends meet. Rumors said my sister was constantly being nagged by my parents to find a job, and their family relationship was deteriorating daily. Although I'm not interested in their lives, it's clear their standard of living has dropped significantly since I left. It's truly a case of reaping what you sow. As for me, I'm now enjoying a fulfilling life with my beloved dog in a new pet-friendly apartment. I can work whenever I want without anyone complaining. My earnings are mine to spend on myself and Muffin, and I'm extremely happy with how things are going now. "Muffin, let's go to the dog park today," I said. Muffin seemed more lively, perhaps because that noisy family was gone. From now on, I want to protect him for the rest of my life and lead a peaceful, happy life together. "Oh, is it true you've bought a house? If so, I'd be interested in living with you." Suddenly, my mother-in-law made such a crazy suggestion on the phone. She probably heard about our new house from my husband. I could hear my sister-in-law laughing in the background. Does she think I can't hear her laughing? Honestly, I don't want to live with my mother-in-law and the others. I thought my husband felt the same way. However, now that they know about our house, maybe they think we'll all live together. The thought that my husband might be agreeing with them worries me a bit, but I don't plan to go along with their plans. Are they trying to manipulate me? If that's their plan, I'll turn the tables. After all the hard times I faced, I've promised myself revenge against them. My name is Callie Brooke. I'm 33 years old and work at a big financial company. I married my husband, James, 4 years ago. We don't have kids yet for a good reason, a decision we both take seriously. James and I are focused on our careers, working hard to get ahead. Once we're more settled in our jobs, we plan to build our home and make a good place to raise kids. We've decided to think about having kids once our careers are more stable. This was a serious decision, sharing our true feelings and thoughts. We do want kids someday. Now, as we get ready for that, I remember all the struggles I've had. Then one day I completed a big project at work and got a promotion. My salary was good, but the promotion made things even better. Meanwhile, James also got a big raise for his years of work. With both our incomes going up, I felt it was time to make our dream of building our own home a reality. I brought up the topic with James. James, I want to talk to you. Over the past year, both of us have had stable incomes. I think it might be time to consider getting our own home. What do you think? Is it time already? James sounded excited. Actually, I've been thinking about it too. But since I haven't been promoted yet, I felt a bit hesitant to bring it up. Don't worry about that. It's not like only one of us needs to earn money. I was thinking it might be okay to build our home in my name. Really? Well, you do earn more now. If you're okay with it, let's build our home in your name. All right, let's do that. Let's go see some model houses on our next day off. Sounds great, let's go. We shouldn't miss this opportunity. I really feel grateful for choosing James at times like this as we share the same values. The following week, we made an appointment to view model homes as planned. We looked at various types of houses, expanding our vision for our own home. On weekends, we began creating simple floor plans together, researching online. During a recent visit to a construction company, they suggested that instead of leaving everything to them, it's better if we create our own image for a more satisfying home. So James and I started building that image. However, neither of us has much knowledge of architecture or design. Even with research, it takes time to put it into practice. While taking breaks, we continued working. Then the doorbell rang. I thought it was a delivery, but when I opened the door, my mother-in-law was standing there unexpectedly. "Ha, Mother, what brings you here so suddenly like this?" My mother-in-law sometimes visits our place without notice. She glared at me and, without a word, took off her shoes and went to the house on her own. "I'm here, James." "Ha, Mom, what's up?" James was surprised by his mother's visit. "Did you have some business around here?" James asked his mother, who looked a bit perplexed. "Yes, I told Callie about it over the phone a little while ago, but it seems James didn't know." "I see, maybe Callie forgot to tell me." "That's not true, Mom. It's not forgetfulness. Callie is incredibly busy with work and at the same time, she takes care of the household. Her mind is always full of things to do." "You're such a kind boy, James. If your late father were here, he definitely wouldn't have forgiven that. I really respect Callie a lot." "So, Mom, why did you come here today?" James asked his mother. She smiled happily, then pulled out a travel brochure from her bag, opened it to a page marked with a post-it note, and placed it on the table. "Listen, James, I've always wanted to go to Niagara Falls State Park. Won't you take me, please?" My mother-in-law suddenly made this request, catching both James and me by surprise. We just stared at her, shocked. My mother-in-law kept pushing James, who was clearly overwhelmed. "Come on, James, you agree, right? Think of it as showing respect and caring for your mom." "Wait a minute, Mom. It's difficult if you suddenly say you want to go on a trip. Though you can come too. Actually, I was thinking of going with Martha. But if James wants to, I'd be happy to make it a family trip. Martha is James's sister." "What are you talking about? Callie is here, and I can't take time off work. But isn't it odd for me to pay for a trip for you and my sister? Not strange at all. Spending money on the family is a wonderful thing. Don't you think so, Kelly? She suddenly turned to me, seeking my agreement. Though taken aback, I firmly expressed my opinion. Using one's own money for family isn't bad, but forcing it on others is different. What do you mean by that? Are you saying I'm trying to extort travel money from James? I didn't mean to put it so harshly, but listening to you, it sounded like you just wanted us to pay for the trip. Kelly, that's terrible. I had no such intention, but you're making me out to be the villain in front of James. I'm so shocked. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean to call you a villain. I just answered honestly to what was asked. Okay, no need for excuses, Kelly. Why are you so heartless? You must not like me. My mother-in-law, visibly upset, glared at me with cold eyes. It always turns out like this when she visits. She always finds some reason to ask for money and then spends it with Martha. While spending money on the family sounds nice, what my mother-in-law does is practically extortion. The situation is different when James gives them money out of kindness. Even though they are family, I never really liked James's bold mother and sister. According to James, they became selfish after his father passed away. James's father died when James was in high school. Back then, the father took care of the finances. After he died, there was no one to oversee the spending, and they even used up the life insurance money freely. Martha, James's sister, only works part-time, so her salary is low, and they are always struggling financially. That's why she often comes to our house with excuses like life is tough, or she wants to travel to relax, but really she's trying to get money from James. Before marrying James, it seemed like he couldn't say no to his mother's constant demands. Especially after his father died, he felt he owed her because she took care of him. But since marrying me, James has started to see their true nature. Even though they often ask for money, he's been trying hard to say no lately. For James, that's a big step forward. He has even started to speak up firmly to his mother. When his mother spitefully said things like, "You don't like me, do you?" Or "Why should I tolerate such an uncharming daughter-in-law?" James stood up for me. Just because you're my mom doesn't mean you can speak badly of Kelly. Didn't Kelly just answer your question? You're taking Kelly's side. What are you talking about? I think you're wrong here, Mom. That's so unfair. Surely Kelly must have turned you against me. Poor thing, you were such a kind child before we got married. No, Mom, that's not it. I'm saying this because I truly believe it. James's firm response surprised my mother-in-law, who wasn't used to being challenged like that. Frustrated and biting her lower lip, she said, "Fine," and left. Kelly, I'm sorry. I always make you feel uncomfortable, don't I? No, it's okay. You stood up for us this time. Once we build our own home, we'll be further away. Let's not interact with Mom and then. Yeah, that would be a relief. If you're okay with it, Kelly, I'm grateful. The place we're considering for our new home is quite far from our current apartment and will make getting to both of our workplaces easier. Our current apartment is about 5 train stations away from James's parents' home, but the new house will be 3 times farther and will require transfers. The route from the station is also complicated, so if we don't give them the address, they won't be able to find our new home. It's a good chance to cleanly break off our relationship with my mother-in-law. Later, we submitted our imagined floor plan to the construction company, and construction started 3 months later. After about half a year, our $700,000 dream home was completed. We managed to squeeze some time from our busy work schedules to pack a few days before the move. I received a call from my mother-in-law on my smartphone. Busy packing, I turned on the speaker and answered, "Hello." My mother-in-law started speaking in an unusually high-pitched voice. "Kelly, when are you moving? You bought a house, right? I want to live with you." Suddenly, on the phone, my mother-in-law began to say such an outrageous thing. She must have heard about our new home purchase from James. I could hear Martha, my sister-in-law, chuckling in the background. That's great. We can make Kelly work for us every day. Mom, you came up with a good idea. Martha joined in. Did they think their words weren't reaching me? It's clear they plan to piggyback on our move. I imagine them planning to use me for an easy life. Honestly, I have no intention of living with them. I thought James felt the same, but telling them about the new house, could it be that they're assuming we'll live together? The thought that my beloved James might be in league with them fills me with a bit of fear, but I have no intention of letting them have their way. They're probably trying to use me, right? If that's how they want to play it, I'll just turn their tactics around on them. I casually told them the date of our move. Following that, my mother-in-law and Martha said they'd come over to our apartment in the afternoon on that day. They wanted a ride in our car and even asked us to arrange the movers for them too. They hung up right after making their demands, but obviously I had no intention of following through. First, I needed to talk to James about it. As I turned to find James, he was already standing behind me. James, you were there. I was just coming to say we should take a break. Was that your mom on the phone just now? Yeah, I was going to talk to you about it too. James replied, Why did you tell your mother about our new home? It wasn't exactly like that. Last time Mom came over, she saw the floor plan for our new house lying around. She's been pestering me about it every day, so I ended up telling her a bit more than I intended. I'm really sorry, Kelly. So you don't plan to live with your mother, right? Of course not. After overhearing that phone call, I'm even more convinced that we should cut ties with her. James looked angrier than I had ever seen him. He explained that his mother had seen the layout of our new home and assumed it was quite spacious. She had feigned interest, pestering him with calls asking about the number of rooms and details of the facilities, but it was clear James was on my side, which was a huge relief. There's no problem then. This strengthened my resolve to stand up to my mother-in-law. I was tired of her having free rein to say whatever she wanted. It was time to put an end to that behavior. I was determined to handle this situation properly once and for all. When the day of the move came, James and I had the movers transport our belongings in the morning, and we drove to our new home. By the time we had moved everything in, it was past 2:00 p.m. We took a break and checked our phones, noticing dozens of missed calls from my mother-in-law. She also called me, James said, sounding exhausted. Then, as if on cue, my mother-in-law called again. I answered, putting her on speakerphone. Hello, Kelly, where are you? I told you I'd be at the apartment this afternoon, didn't I? Yes, you did say that. I responded calmly. So, what can I do for you? What do you mean you didn't arrange for the movers? I've been waiting at home and not a single truck has shown up, so I had to go to your apartment myself. Is that so? Well, that's too bad. My response was nonchalant, signaling that her attempts to manipulate us weren't going to work anymore. I hadn't arranged for any movers. What? That's not the agreement. Where is your new house? She demanded, clearly taken aback. Do you really think I'd tell you? I responded firmly. My mother-in-law uttered a shocked, "Ha!" She probably thought that as long as James was around, she could manipulate the situation to her advantage. But James has changed. He's now my steadfast ally as we try to sever the unhealthy ties with his family. Feeling a surge of determination, I spoke up clearly. Just to let you know, neither James nor I intend to live with you two from now on. Please don't involve yourselves in our lives anymore. What are you saying? Your opinion doesn't matter here. It's up to James to decide. At least tell me where the new house is, she insisted. How are you going to get here without even knowing the address? This house is in my name. I have the right to decide who lives here. If you two just barge in, it's trespassing, and I'll take legal action if necessary. Trespassing? How dare you say that about your husband's family? At that point, James intervened. his voice assertive and detached. Family? My father, who is indeed a family member, is gone, isn't he? What are you saying, James? She asked, clearly rattled. After that last phone call, I'm utterly fed up with you both. Just having a blood relation with you is embarrassing. From now on, my family consists only of Matthew and Kelly. I no longer consider you two as my family. Wait, James, don't say such harsh things. Don't bother us again, understood? James said firmly. With that, James ended the call without waiting for a reply and immediately set his phone to blocker calls. Hey, James, are you really okay with this? I asked, concerned about how decisive he had been. Yeah, James replied, his voice steady but tired. I finally realized that Mom was just using me for her own advantage. It's time to stop letting her control our lives. Liv, I feel completely relieved now. Seeing James genuinely refreshed and fully embracing his decision has only added to my peace of mind. His conviction in severing ties was strong, and it reflected a pivotal moment in our relationship. A moment where we collectively decided to cut off the negative influences that his mother and sister had become. This decision has dramatically reshaped not just our lives, but theirs as well. James ceased all financial support, leaving them to reconsider their approach to daily life. Without James's financial backup, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law found themselves in a precarious position. They were suddenly thrust into a reality where they had to fend for themselves, something they hadn't anticipated. My sister-in-law, who had been relying on part-time jobs for income, found it difficult to cover all her expenses on such erratic earnings. The situation became dire enough that even my mother-in-law, who had spent most of her life as a housewife, was compelled to enter the workforce. Returning to work after such a long hiatus was no small challenge for her. Accustomed to the comfort of her home, she struggled to adapt to the demands and pace of a work environment. Her inexperience and lack of recent work history did her no favors, leading to many awkward and often embarrassing moments at work. She found it difficult to perform tasks that her colleagues did effortlessly, leading to frustration not only for her, but also for those around her. This often resulted in her being somewhat disliked at her workplace, adding to the stress of her new reality. Back in our world, James and I were building a peaceful life in our new home. The absence of sudden, unannounced visits from my mother-in-law was a relief we had long sought. Our home became our sanctuary, a place of tranquility far removed from the previous chaos that had so often disrupted our peace. Living without the constant stress of familial interference, we felt liberated and truly stress-free. I am endlessly grateful for James's courage and unwavering support. His decision to stand by me and prioritize our well-being over familial obligations was a testament to the strength of our bond. As we move forward, I know we may encounter other challenges, but the trust and mutual respect we've cultivated give me confidence. With James by my side, I believe we can face anything together. We are committed to supporting each other through all of life's ups and downs, walking hand in hand with the assurance that we can overcome whatever obstacles may come our way. This new chapter of our lives, free from the shadows of toxic relationships, promises not only growth, but also a deeper appreciation for the peace we fought so hard to achieve. For a very long time, I have always known that my parents love my oldest sister, Vicky, more than me. She was the planned child, while I was the result of an accidental pregnancy just 10 months later. They probably didn't even want me, but decided to keep the pregnancy anyway. My mother's parents had passed away before I was even born, but my dad's parents were very much alive, so they took on a significant role in my upbringing. Grandma and Grandpa were the constants in my life, providing the love and support that I often felt lacking from my own parents. I remember so many instances when my parents would leave me behind with my grandparents and only take my sister on trips. When I was young, I didn't mind because it was fun living with my grandparents, but as I started to grow up, Around 6 or 7 years old, I realized just how unfair this was. But my problem wasn't just with my parents, it was also with my sister, Vicky. While I harbored no ill will towards Vicky, I couldn't help but feel like an unwanted addition to the family. She knew that as well and made me feel like a stranger every day in my own home. She would always compete with me for everything, whether it was about grades, attention from our parents, or even the smallest accomplishments. It felt like a constant battle for validation, and I was always on the losing end because my parents preferred her always. As a result, I would feel really inferior, and we never quite saw eye to eye. Our relationship seemed more like a perpetual contest, with her consistently coming out on top. On one occasion, she wanted to be friends with a group of girls, but because she was nerdy, she was afraid to approach them. One of the girls and I had art classes together, so she introduced me to the rest of the group, and we all would hang out together. Vicky was so jealous of this that she made my parents talk to me about including her whenever I was hanging out with them. Tried to fight, but my mother called me selfish, while my dad said she was my sister and I should look after her. Begrudgingly, I agreed and introduced Vicky to the rest of the girls. Now, Vicky doesn't really have a lot of friends, so she can come off as over-enthusiastic. She would constantly try to impress the girls in our group, often coming across as intrusive. Despite her efforts, she struggled to find her place among them, and the awkward tension between Vicky and the other girls was always palpable. For example, one of the girls had a crush on a guy, so Vicky took it upon herself to approach the guy and let him know that the girl liked him. He laughed because he was not interested and went and told everyone about it, which embarrassed the girl. After this, the girls told me very firmly that they didn't want me to bring Vicky with me to our hangouts. So I agreed. However, Vicky wasn't having it. She threw a tantrum when she found out that the girls wanted nothing to do with her and went to our parents, insisting that I should not hang out with these mean girls either. Since I was her sister, she thought I should stand up for her. I refused and told her it was her own fault, that they didn't want to be friends with her. But my parents, as usual, supported her. They lectured me about how Vicky had no ill intentions and that I should try to convince the girls to forgive Vicky. If they didn't, I should cut them off too. I refused and put my foot down. I liked hanging out with them, and unlike Vicky, I wasn't going to jeopardize my friendship in any way. I told my parents that I had enough and it wasn't up to me to find friends for Vicky. My parents were pissed and gave me the silent treatment for weeks, but I am glad I stuck to my guns. This group of girls has continued to be my friends to this day and are basically like my sisters. I have cried with them, laughed with them, and shared some of the most meaningful moments of my life. However, at that time, it was really hard for me to stand firm in my decision. There were moments when doubt crept in, when I questioned whether I had made the right choice in prioritizing my own happiness over what they wanted. This was not the only reason Vicky grew to hate me. There was also another incident with a boy she had a crush on, a guy I had no idea about. He and I would sit together for some classes because we were friends. He tried to ask me out for junior prom, but I declined politely since I was already going with someone I liked. Later, when Vicky found out, she made a huge scene about it, telling my parents how I always take things she wants and that I was knowingly flirting with the guy for months. She called me a bunch of nasty words, which no one should say to their own sister, and told my parents how she wished I was not her sister. My mother sided with her, telling me how it was wrong of me and that, as a sister, I should respect the girl code. I tried telling them that I wasn't even interested in the guy and had declined his invitation, so she was free to ask him if she wanted, but Vicky refused to let it go. Looking back, I think she knew the guy would have rejected her anyway, so she just wanted to take her frustration out on me since he asked me instead of her. Once, my dad took me out for ice cream, telling me that he wanted to spend some father-daughter time with me. This never happened, so I was really pleased. However, he He started asking me a bunch of questions like if my boyfriend and I were being careful, if my boyfriend came from a good family, or if we ever did drugs. I was taken aback by his line of questioning and asked him what he meant by all this. This is when my dad revealed that Vicky had been making up stories and telling my parents for months that I was doing drugs and drinking alcohol with my boyfriend. This was a complete lie, and I showed my dad my phone for him to verify that Vicky was lying. Later, when my dad confronted her about all the lies, she tried to justify that no one our age just hangs out with a guy and that I was hiding things from everyone. I was so pissed that I yelled at her for trying to make unnecessary drama and told her that it wasn't my fault, that she had no one to date, but that she needed to keep her nose out of my business. Vicky didn't like it and punched me. This happened out of nowhere since she had never been physically violent before. My nose started bleeding as I fell down on the ground, clutching my face in pain. My parents rushed me to the emergency room, and all the while, they were pleading with me not to file a police complaint against Vicky. They kept saying how it would ruin her life. While I was sitting in the back seat clutching my face, Vicky didn't even care, nor did she apologize. Later, when the nurse asked me about the incident, I told her the truth, and she called CPS. My parents were furious with me for involving CPS, viewing it as a betrayal of family loyalty. In their eyes, Vicky's actions were dismissed as a mere accident, an isolated incident that should not warrant such drastic intervention. They pleaded with the authorities, insisting that Vicky was not a danger to me and that her actions were out of character. In the end, Vicky was let go, but they warned my parents that they would keep a close eye on our situation in case any other accidents happened with me. As you can imagine, Vicky was really shaken up, and so were my parents. Later, my parents told me that they were disappointed in me for trying to ruin my sister's life. My mother started to cry and told me how I was tearing the family apart by involving outsiders. My father's disappointment was palpable, his words heavy with reproach as he questioned my decision to escalate the situation. I told him firmly that I wanted Vicky out of my life, and they agreed. I did feel guilty involving the authorities, but for the first time, I felt safe in my own house. Once Vicky had been formally warned, my parents had a separate conversation with her, and since that day, she stopped talking to me altogether. I very much prefer this over her constantly hovering around me or trying to insert herself into my life. When my grandparents found out about this incident, they asked me to pack my bags so I could live with them for the remainder of high school. They informed my parents, who did not protest much, so I left to live with my grandparents. Unlike my parents' place, I felt safe and loved there. The remaining days of high school went well, and I made lasting memories with my friends. My parents never once visited me or called me throughout all that time. I knew they were happy with their beloved daughter, so I never tried to contact them, even though it hurt me that they could so easily discard me like I was nothing. When I was graduating high school, my parents only showed up to cheer for Vicky. They didn't even congratulate me or approach me, and it felt like I was just a stranger to them. However, my grandparents were there and scolded my parents for being so blatantly obvious about their favoritism. I don't know what my grandfather told them, but my dad later approached me awkwardly and congratulated me. Later, I found out that I was accepted into a good college with a full scholarship. I was so happy about it because I was dreading asking my parents for any financial help. I informed my grandparents about this, and they offered to take me out to a nice restaurant for dinner. After dinner, my grandmother posted pictures of me on her Facebook account, writing a long caption about how proud she was of me for being such an exceptional student. Our relatives soon found out about it and chimed in, congratulating me. I guess some of them might have reached out to my parents, who had no idea about all this. Instead of feeling happy about it, my mother called to tell me the next day that Vicky had locked herself in her room crying because she had not been accepted yet by any college, and that I was knowingly trying to make my sister feel bad about her grades by talking to all our relatives. She told me how this was all my fault because I was apparently depressed after the CPS incident and had pushed Vicky into bad grades. I was so unbelievably heartbroken that my own mother could blame me for such a thing that it was the last time I ever talked with her for a very long time. My grandparents helped me move into my college dorm. Due to my high school boyfriend's college being far away from me, we had broken up. So I went to college single and ready to embrace the next chapter of my life with newfound independence and determination. The breakup had been difficult, but I was excited to meet new people. This is where I met Rob. He and I were both freshmen and spent half of our days in the library. Rob was unlike anyone I had ever met before. His quiet demeanor and studious nature mirrored my own, and we quickly found common ground in our shared love for academia. As the weeks turned into months, our friendship blossomed into something deeper. I realized that I had developed feelings for Rob that went beyond mere friendship. Being an extrovert, I was quite upfront about my feelings for Rob, and I was surprised to know that he felt the same way. We started going out and have been together for 8 years now. My grandparents have met Rob, and they absolutely adore him. I have met Rob's parents, who literally treat me like their own daughter. On occasion, Rob's mother has even confessed to me how she has always wanted a daughter, so she is glad that Rob met a wonderful person like me. To be honest, this is the first time I have been surrounded by family members who like me and don't actually resent me. I have told Rob stories of my childhood, and he listens to me with empathy and understanding. Throughout these last 8 years, my parents have hardly contacted me except to send an occasional birthday text if they remembered, but that is it. Recently, Rob and I got engaged. He proposed to me while we were trekking to our usual spot to watch the sun rise. It was a dreamy proposal, and it was so sweet how nervous he was to pop the question. I had no doubts in my mind when I accepted the proposal. I posted pictures of my engagement on my Instagram and also informed my grandparents about it. They were so happy for me and congratulated us on our future. I guess the news must have spread because my parents called me out of the blue to congratulate me as well. I thought it was just a casual conversation since we had not talked for years. They asked me about my life, my job, and my apartment before my dad asked straightforwardly if he could walk me down the aisle. I was taken aback by his sudden question since just a few moments ago, he didn't even have an idea about which company I worked for. I told him that I had not thought about it yet. My dad told me how it would be embarrassing if I didn't ask him and others would question us about it, so it's better if he walked me down the aisle. I scoffed and told my parents I didn't even know if I was going to be inviting them to my wedding since we had not been in contact. This pissed my parents off. My mother started to tell me how disappointed she was by my response, emphasizing the importance of family and tradition. She went on to tell me how they would always be my parents no matter what and that I should let bygones be bygones. Part of me was tempted to listen to my parents and accept my dad's offer because I did want our relationship to be mended, but another part of me hesitated, wary of opening myself up to potential disappointment and hurt again. However, I was going to be entering a new chapter of my life in a few months, so I told my dad that he could walk me down the aisle. He seemed overjoyed. During the wedding planning, I reached out to my high school girlfriends, who I had always stayed in touch with despite the physical distance that had grown between us due to our careers. I told them how I wanted the gang back together and that I wanted them to be my bridesmaids. There were a lot of happy tears and congratulations, and without hesitation, they accepted my invitation to be part of my bridal party. Embracing the opportunity to reunite and celebrate this milestone in our lives together, we all planned to go to Vegas to celebrate my bachelorette party, while Rob had a separate bachelor party with his friends. My friends and I posted a bunch of pictures from the party, and overall everyone had a lot of fun. However, when I came back home, my parents called me to let me know how disappointed they were that I had not invited Vicky to be a part of the celebration. I told them that there was no way that I would have involved Vicky in my bachelorette party and that I didn't want her to be a part of my life. This took my parents by surprise, and they asked me what I meant. So I clarified that Vicky's actions, particularly her history of deceit and betrayal, had left me deeply wounded and distrustful of her intentions. I couldn't fathom inviting her to such an intimate and joyous occasion as my bachelorette party, knowing that her presence would only cast a shadow over the festivities. I also informed my parents that this was why she was not invited to my wedding. Hearing this, my parents lost it. They went off about how I had no right to exclude my sister from my wedding and how it was my duty as her sister to include her in such important events. They told me that Vicky had been looking forward to meeting me after she found out that I was getting married. I was confused and asked my parents what gave Vicky that idea, since we had not even talked to each other for such a very long time. My parents brushed my concerns aside, saying this is not how sisters behave with each other. I understand where you're coming from, I told them, but you have to understand that my relationship with Vicky is complicated. After everything that's happened, I just don't feel comfortable having her be a part of my wedding. She has not even once apologized to me for everything she put me through. However, my parents, as usual, ignored my words. My mother kept saying how she wanted what was best for the family and that inviting Vicky wasn't a big deal anyway. My dad insisted that our relatives would talk about why my sister wasn't invited, and this would cast a negative light on my wedding. However, I knew better than to yield to their demands, so I did not relent. I told them that I was okay with people talking behind my back and questioning my character as long as I was surrounded by people I liked and trusted during my wedding. My mother then asked if my fiancé would be okay with this and went on to tell me how my in-laws were going to judge me for being so unbelievably cruel as to exclude my own sister from my wedding. I laughed and informed my parents that my fiancé and in-laws knew about my family dynamics and none of them would even care if Vicky was present or not. They urged me to reconsider, emphasizing the importance of family unity and forgiveness, but I remained steadfast in my resolve, unwilling to compromise my own sense of well-being for the sake of appeasing others. In the end, we agreed to disagree, each of us holding on to our own perspectives. My parents told me how they needed to think things over, and we ended our conversation there. I didn't inform my grandparents about this as I felt a bit guilty for standing up to my parents, and they completely had my back. My grandparents told me that I should not force myself to invite anyone I didn't want there, and that my parents were, as usual, trying to guilt-trip me. Since this conversation, I have been feeling a bit better about my decision and got distracted with my wedding planning since my wedding is fast approaching. Last week, my dad called me to let me know that he had thought long and hard and that he and Mom would no longer be attending the wedding. Before I could even react, he went on to say that this also meant he would not be walking me down the aisle. I asked him if there was a specific reason why, and he informed me that Vicky was going to be moving to a new place soon, which my parents had helped her find. Since I was going to be excluding her from the wedding, she had decided to host a housewarming party that same day, so they would be attending that instead of my wedding. I felt a mix of shock and disbelief wash over me as I processed my father's words. The realization that my own sister's housewarming party took precedence over my wedding was a bitter pill to swallow, exacerbating the sense of hurt and betrayal that I had always felt for years. I simply told him that I understood and hung up the call. Although I tried to act brave in front of my dad, deep down the pain of rejection cut deeper than words could express. When I informed Rob, he was furious about how insensitive my parents could be after they were the ones who had insisted on being invited. He was the one who gave me the idea that I should ask my grandfather, since he and his grandmother were basically there in my life more than my parents. I agreed, so I called up my grandparents and asked them if they would be willing to walk me down the aisle at my wedding. Tears welled up in my eyes as I spoke, overcome with emotion at the thought of how much they meant to me. "You and Grandpa have always been there for me," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "You've been more than just grandparents to me. You've been like parents, and I can't imagine anyone else I'd rather have by my side on my wedding day." My grandparents didn't even hesitate before saying yes. They told me how honored they would be to walk me down the aisle, and unlike my parents, they would not disappoint me. Their words reassured me, and in that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace and contentment wash over me with my grandparents by my side. I knew that I had a family who loved me unconditionally and accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. I also talked to my in-laws about this, and Rob's parents assured me that they did not care if my parents didn't attend. Regardless of their attendance, they were delighted to witness and support our union. My wedding is in 2 days, and today I woke up to several missed calls from my dad. I called him back thinking it was an emergency. When he picked up, he asked me if it was true that my grandparents were walking me down the aisle. I told him yes, that was true. Then my dad went off about how disrespectful this was to have asked my grandparents. I reminded him how he was the one who had declined to come to my wedding, so I didn't see why he was so upset. My dad went on to yell at me about how he and Mom were just trying to make me see the wrong of my ways, and that they thought that by declining the invitation it would teach me a lesson. He went on to say how it was he and Mom who had raised me and paid for my food and education, so my grandparents had no right to replace him. Tried to reason with him, explaining that my grandparents had been there for me in ways he and Mom never were, but he wouldn't listen. He also told me how I had done nothing but alienate everyone from me, and this was all my fault. Since this conversation, I have been wondering if I really did something wrong here. Am I the asshole for asking my grandparents to walk me down the aisle? Update 1. Wow, I did not expect so many people would comment on my post. I have seen a lot of advice and suggestions on how I should approach this situation. I do agree that I need to cut off my parents permanently because their constant back and forth is exhausting and is starting to affect my mental health. I don't want them in my life when they have consistently shown me that Vicky is always their first priority. My parents are indeed selfish, and I have known that for a long time. However, how can a child just stop loving his/her parents? It's much easier to say, but it's very difficult to actually do it. However, for my mental peace, I have no choice but to do this so I can enjoy my wedding tomorrow. Update 2. Sorry for the lack of update this past month, but I have been quite busy since my wedding. First of all, yes, my wedding went quite well. With my grandparents by my side as I walked down the aisle, I felt a deep sense of joy as I exchanged vows with Rob, committing to spend the rest of our lives together. My girlfriends and I danced the night away, and I can't begin to describe how important it is to stay in touch with your childhood friends, no matter what, because sometimes they are your chosen family. During the reception, I did feel a twinge of sadness at the realization that my parents were not there to share in this special moment, especially as I watched Rob's parents and cousins giving speeches. However, I took solace in the knowledge that I had made the right decision for myself, prioritizing my own well-being and happiness. Some of my girlfriends did give speeches, sharing memories of our experiences and the bond that had carried us through both good times and bad. In the days following the wedding, Rob and I went for our honeymoon, which his parents had paid for as a wedding gift. I spent all my days just lazing around, enjoying myself with my husband. I feel so giddy every time I look at Rob and realize that he is married to me. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, I did cut off my parents by blocking them from everywhere. I didn't bother sending them an explanation because, very frankly, they don't even deserve one. I have no idea whether Vicky actually had a housewarming that day or it was just an excuse for my parents to not attend my wedding, but at this point I don't care. I wish nothing but the best to them and their beloved daughter. Update 3. So I was not going to update anything further since my last update, but something unexpected happened and I thought you all deserved to know. I hadn't checked my email in the past month because I was busy with my wedding and honeymoon. But today, as I was sorting through the emails, I found an email from Vicky. I don't even know how she found out my email address, and I was completely taken aback. I hesitated over whether to open her mail or simply delete it unread, but curiosity got the better of me, so I clicked on the email. Inside was a lengthy message from Vicky expressing her regret over our strained relationship and her desire to reconcile. She acknowledged the mistakes she had made in the past, admitting that she had been selfish and immature. Vicky apologized for the pain she had caused me over the years and expressed a genuine desire to make amends. She went on to write how she feels happy for me now that I'm married and that she wishes me nothing but the best. She ended the mail pleading that I should not punish my parents by cutting them off and that they missed me. Reading her words, I felt a mix of emotions: surprise, skepticism. Part of me wants to believe that Vicky has truly changed, that she is sincere in her apology and willing to work towards repairing our relationship. But another part of me remains guarded because this seems too good to be true. However, regardless of what she has written, I know for sure my parents don't miss me, because if they had, they would not have treated me this way all these years. I thought about sending a reply back to her, but then I decided against it. After all, forgiveness isn't something to be rushed. It is a process that requires time and reflection. And while I am not sure if I'm ready to forgive Vicky, I don't want to completely burn the bridge either, since she is the one who has apologized to me for her actions. To be honest, after my marriage, I no longer feel alone. I have learned to recognize that I have my loving husband by my side, supportive friends, and the unwavering love of my grandparents. And with their support, I know that I can navigate whatever challenges lay ahead without ever needing Vicky or my parents in my life. I have also looked into it and have found a good therapist with whom I have booked my first appointment. I have taken this step so that I can address and resolve any wounds from my past and heal from them. So here's the deal. I'm going to buy that fancy car from you. Margareta doesn't need it. She's just a regular person. My parents mentioned they wanted a new car, and since I got married to Brandon, he's been acting pretty selfish. He's been eyeing up the nice car my parents gave me, and I've had enough of it. My name's Margareta. I'm 25 and I met Brandon in college. We've been married for 2 years now. Brandon is outgoing and popular. Unlike me, I'm shy and don't have many friends. We started talking more during college classes, then we began studying together. I never thought someone like Brandon would be interested in me, but he surprised me by asking me out. I was really happy and said yes right away. That's how our relationship started. It made sense why I liked Brandon. He was handsome, friendly, and serious about his studies. But for him, things should have been different. He had lots of cute, stylish female friends. Finding another girlfriend wouldn't have been hard for him. Once, I bravely asked him, "Do you really think I'm the right one for you?" He seemed surprised and asked why I was bringing it up. I admitted I'm not very confident. I wanted to know why he chose me. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I guess it's comfortable being with you." I wasn't satisfied, but before I could say anything, he seemed annoyed and started playing with his phone. Not wanting to argue, I quickly ended the conversation. "Yeah, you're right. Sorry for bringing it up." Even though I still had doubts, our relationship kept going smoothly. Time passed quickly. We finished college, got married, and moved into a condo. I got a job at a regular company while Brandon went off to do more school and research. When I told my mom we were getting married, she was really happy. She said, "That's great news. We were starting to worry. We thought you'd introduce us to a boyfriend sooner." I felt bad for not telling them about Brandon earlier, but Mom understood. She said I've always been independent, handling things on my own. Knowing Brandon was there for me made her feel better. My parents met in college and still love each other a lot, which I admire. Dad worked hard climbing up the ladder at a big company. Mom supported him and also pursued her passion for cooking. She became really good at it and even teaches cooking classes now. They respected each other's lives and gave each other space. Growing up with them, I learned to be independent too. I wasn't great at much except studying, so I didn't go to grad school. I wanted to be self-sufficient and start my own life soon, even though I grew up in a well-off family. I didn't want to rely on them forever. I wanted to have a family of my own, like Mom and Dad. I hope to make them proud by having kids someday. It might sound simple, but for someone like me, it's a big goal. Once we moved in together, Brandon started acting more selfishly. He was a grad student and worked part-time, but he didn't pitch in much for our living costs. I tried bringing it up gently, saying, "Hey, Brandon, it would be really helpful if you could contribute more of your part-time earnings towards our expenses." But he just coldly replied, "I do contribute some, you know. And didn't you say you'd handle the living expenses when we moved in together?" Brandon always talked about wanting to be a professor, which is why he went to grad school. I had assured him not to worry about money when we got married, telling him I had a good job. I murmured, "Yeah, I did say that," feeling unsure about what to say next. Brandon sighed heavily. "You wouldn't get it. Being a grad student costs a lot for socializing and stuff. Oh, and by the way, I need money for a research trip. Can you lend me $500? I'll pay you back later." Brandon's financial pressure became more common, and our problems got worse. He started spending more nights away from home, leaving me waiting by the phone with cold meals in front of me. When he did come home happy for a change, I was too forgiving. He'd sometimes say things like, "Hey, Margareta, remember you wanted to go somewhere? I have tomorrow off? Let's go." He'd bring up outings out of nowhere or compliment my cooking, making me feel special. Each time he was nice to me, I'd catch a glimpse of the happy married life I wanted, and it made me hesitate. But I knew this wasn't normal. I felt lonely and anxious, but couldn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't want to upset my parents, who were thrilled about our marriage. They must have started to notice something wasn't right. When I finally visited my parents after a long time, Dad suggested I stay over and have dinner with them. Mom cooked a big meal to welcome me back. During dinner, Dad mentioned my Aunt Ellen had visited recently and wanted to see me. He said she's always spontaneous like that. Ellen was lively, ambitious, and independent. I'll reach out to her soon. Thanks, Dad. Dad mentioned how much my Aunt Ellen loved me and how she always teased about Brandon stealing me from her, even though she didn't want to get married herself. That's just how she was. Before I met Brandon, Ellen was more like a close friend than an aunt. I could talk to her about anything, even things I couldn't tell my parents. She understood me better than anyone and was always there for me. At first, I was too shy to tell her about Brandon, but I wanted to see her again and show her I was doing okay. A few days after staying with my parents, I met Ellen at a cafe. She was dressed stylishly as usual. Ellen checked out my outfit and said gently, "You know, Margareta, marriage is just the start of a lifelong journey for a woman. You should always feel confident and attractive. No matter what, your clothes can make a big difference, so don't forget to take care of yourself." Then she took a sip of her tea gracefully. I totally forgot about fashion lately. "I'm sorry for not keeping in touch for so long," I murmured apologetically. Ellen replied, "That's typical of you, Margareta. It's good to be honest and serious, but being too timid usually comes from lack of experience. But I was thrilled when I heard you found someone special. I thought, finally, Margareta is taking a step forward." It had been ages since I spent time with someone outside on a day off, and the weather was perfect. We sat on the terrace, basking in the warm sunlight. In that peaceful moment, I felt like I could talk to Ellen about my worries without feeling too down. I had hoped even someone as shy as me could make it work with Brandon at first, but Ellen listened to my whole story without interrupting, just nodding kindly. When I finished, she asked, "I suppose you haven't mentioned this to your parents, have you, Margareta?" "No, I even hesitated to tell you today. I didn't want to admit my weaknesses to anyone. I thought I should be able to handle this on my own, to be truly independent. I know if Mom and Dad found out, they'd want to bring me back home right away. So I want to try to deal with this by myself as much as possible." Ellen respected my decision and didn't push further, but she added, "If you ever really need help, let me know first. If my dear Margareta asks for help, I'll be there for you no matter where I am." A month later, Mom called and said, "When you have time, could you come over? It's not urgent." Since I had the next day off, I went to see my parents. When I saw a car parked in the driveway, I couldn't contain my excitement. "Dad, is this car new? Did you just get it? Dad, can I really take it for a spin? What if I crash it?" I teased, feeling excited about the fancy car. "Don't worry about that. This car is for you, Margareta. Use it however you like. It'll come in handy," Mom whispered to me. "We saw this car in a TV commercial and you said you liked it." Dad recalled, "So it's our gift to you. You've been going through a tough time lately, so we wanted to cheer you up. If things get tough, just drive this and come home anytime," he said with a warm smile. The car Dad got for me was an SUV from a famous foreign brand, and he even arranged a parking spot near my condo. I couldn't believe it and laughed in disbelief later when I was driving downtown. I reached into my pocket, found the car key, and pressed the button. The lights flashed in all directions. Just then, I heard a familiar voice calling out from behind, "What's with the car?" I turned to see Brandon, my husband, who hadn't been home in a while. It felt like we were living separate lives. I was speechless as he looked at the car with a smug expression. "Ah, I see, a gift from your parents, right?" Every time I faced Brandon, I struggled to find my voice, but I was tired of feeling that way. "Brandon, don't you care anymore? Do you even care about me?" I managed to say, gathering my courage. Then Brandon said something shocking. "Are you just realizing now? Did you really think I love you all this time? It's ridiculous how hopeful you are." His dry laugh rang in my ears. Something inside me snapped, and I blurted out louder than usual, "Then why did you marry me?" "Wow, really? You're going to be that cold about it?" I couldn't believe what Brandon was saying. "So marrying me was just a meal ticket for you, huh? And now you want the car too because it's wasted on me. That's just great." Brandon didn't seem to care about how hurtful his words were. He added, "You know we're getting divorced. Without me, you'll never find another man, so think about it." With those words, Brandon left without a second thought, leaving me feeling angry and heartbroken. My head pounded with a headache. I sat in the driver's seat for a while, trying to calm down. Eventually, I called my Aunt Ellen for advice. A few days later, I agreed to the divorce and moved back in with my parents. They welcomed me with open arms, and life started to feel peaceful again. But that peace was short-lived. One afternoon, Brandon showed up at my parents' house with his parents. They sat down in the living room, and Brandon's father spoke up in a stern tone. "We're here to talk about our son's divorce. It's urgent." When drafting the divorce papers, I warned Brandon, "If you don't agree to the divorce, I'll use my parents' connections at the university to ruin your future. It wouldn't be hard to damage the career of a junior registrar if their daughter complains." Brandon's father claimed Margareta's behavior was too harsh. It's clear she was trying to intimidate him. We could easily challenge the divorce. Behind her plain appearance, she's actually a mean and greedy woman. Poor Brandon. He continued, "I heard she paid him to stay away. She must have had other men over. We need to go to family court and claim that Brandon was threatened by his wife. But if there's a proper apology, things might change. For example, if Margareta gives up that car she's driving, it might help smooth things over." Brandon and his parents remained silent, just listening to their father's protests. Suddenly, the doorbell rang and Mom went to answer it. Ellen appeared behind Mom as she came back to the living room. "Sorry I'm late. How's the discussion going?" Brandon's family had met Ellen once at my wedding. "What are you doing here? It's rude to barge in like that. We're busy right now. Outsiders should leave," Brandon's mother objected. No, don't be like that. You've heard about Brandon's divorce, right?" How would an outsider like you know about that? Brandon's mother snapped. I had been informed by my brother earlier. I couldn't miss such an important moment for my dear niece, Ellen said, offering a reassuring glance. You're probably here to stop the divorce or for money. Can you still say that after seeing this? Ellen pulled out a stack of documents from her bag, laid them out on the table, and showed them to everyone. I hired a detective to look into this. It turns out Brandon has been cheating on Margareta with multiple women despite being married. He hardly came home because of it. He took advantage of Margareta's kindness and even asked her for money. That's ridiculous. I was just busy with my research at the university. When I did come home, we ate together and went on trips, right? We were like any other married couple, right, Margareta? Say something, Brandon said defensively. You don't need to defend yourself. We'll handle this. It's not your fault. We understand, his father reassured him. That's right. These documents from who knows where are surely lies. Our Brandon would never cheat. He's such a kind and outstanding son, his mother protested. You might be kind to your parents, but that kindness seems to end there. Like father, like son, Ellen countered. Now Brandon's mother, take a look at these photos. Ellen pulled out a picture from the documents. I recently stayed at a hotel for a business meeting and saw Nicholas there. He was with another woman looking very cozy. So I had the detective look into Nicholas too. The results were just as I expected. Do you understand now? Brandon's mother's face went pale as she grabbed the documents and examined them closely. What is this, Nicholas? How long have you've been doing this? It's all lies, isn't it, Veronica? Stop looking, give me that, Nicholas said, looking panicked as he tried to snatch the documents, but it was too late. Distraught, Veronica confronted Nicholas. You've been cheating on me. The car you wanted so badly was for her in these photos, wasn't it? No matter how hard Nicholas tried to calm her down, Veronica wouldn't listen. The discussion about Brandon's divorce was forgotten as Veronica stormed out of the house crying, with Nicholas following after her. Left behind, Brandon said, "Hey, wait, what about me?" and followed them out in confusion. The rest of us were left in stunned silence for a while, but Ellen had a satisfied look on her face, winking at me. Later, Ellen told me that Brandon's parents did end up getting divorced. You won't fall for such a terrible man again. Let's make you more attractive. I'll teach you everything about grooming yourself as a woman. Despite her busy schedule, Ellen visited me often and took me to various places like meals and shopping trips. During that time, I learned a lot from her. A year after the divorce, I made the decision to go to graduate school. I worked hard to improve myself, focusing on my studies. Time passed quickly, and one day I heard someone call my name at a street intersection. I turned around to see Brandon. It's been a while. You've changed a lot, haven't you? At first, I didn't even recognize him. In Brandon's eyes, the woman standing before him was no longer the plain ex-wife he knew, but had transformed into an incredibly beautiful and attractive woman. Meanwhile, Brandon had fallen on hard times due to the scandal of his parents' divorce. It seemed he was no longer attending graduate school. His parents, Nicholas and Veronica, had decided to stop providing him with financial support because of the trouble he caused. He was struggling to afford his tuition and living expenses, far from the carefree life he once enjoyed. The women who used to be interested in him had left him one by one. The former glory he once had vanished in an instant, and now he found himself face to face with his ex-wife, who seemed to be a completely different person. As Brandon was about to suggest catching up, a man approached and asked, "Sorry for the wait. Are you a friend of Margareta's?" It was Leonard, the man I was currently dating. "Wow, that guy is really handsome, isn't he? He's so tall. Could he be a model?" commented a group of women nearby, looking at Leonard. "He's someone from my past, but it's okay. We're finished talking. Let's go, shall we? Leonard said, taking my hand and briefly acknowledging Brandon. Brandon stood there stunned as Leonard led me away by the hand without a second thought for Brandon. Leonard and I walked towards the crosswalk, and I didn't look back, keeping my gaze straight ahead as we left.